I want to take you back into the Wayback Machine here, and then I'm going to bring you up to the moment. And in the Wayback Machine, Dwight Eisenhower, in my lifetime, was, in my opinion, the only legitimately elected Republican president in my lifetime. And Dwight Eisenhower was born a year after was elected president of the United States a year after I was born. And so I don't, have a great recollection of him. I remember the last few years of his presidency fairly clearly. And I remember his farewell address, which we'll get to in just a second. But in 1953, in the third year of his presidency, or arguably the second and a half year, but whatever, the third year of his presidency, he was invited by the American Association of Newspaper Editors to New York City to give a speech. And he gave this absolutely astonishing speech. Now, keep in mind, this guy was the supreme commander of Allied forces in Europe during World War II. He was a five-star general. We don't even have five-star generals right now, I don't think. I think you can only get your fifth star during time of actual declared war. I mean, maybe we do, and that's why we have all these little conflicts and things. But I mean, it was just he was this extraordinary. He had seen death. He had seen destruction. He had worked his way to the top of the military. In 1952, when it was speculated that Dwight Eisenhower was going to run for president, nobody knew if he was going to run as a Democrat or a Republican because he was so apolitical up to that point. He ultimately ran as a Republican, and I think it's because Harry Truman was running as a Democrat for re-election, and Harry Truman had gotten the United States involved in the war in Korea, and it was a very unpopular war. Dwight's 1952 campaign for president was vote for Eisenhower, vote for peace. That was the slogan. And he negotiated peace with the Koreans, with the North Koreans, negotiated a truce in 1952 as soon as he became president. So in 53, and this would have been the first year of his presidency. He was elected in November of 52. He was sworn in January of 53. And a few months after he was sworn in, he gave this speech to the American Association of Newspaper Editors where he talked about when a world at war is not a world, it's not just arms, it's not just the military. It is what the military takes from. A battleship represents thousands of bushels of wheat. A bomber represents miles of highway and homes that could be built, those kinds of things. This is what the president, the Republican president of the United States, in the first year of his presidency, said to the American Association of Newspaper Reporters. Listen to this, and listen to this carefully. The last Republican with any integrity in my lifetime who was president of the United States. Here he is.
Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed,
A theft.
Those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children. The cost of one modern heavy bomber is this: a modern brick school in more than 30 cities. It is 2 electric power plants, each serving a town of 60,000 population. It is 2 fine, fully equipped hospitals. It is some 50 miles of concrete pavement. We pay for a single fighter plane with 500,000 bushels of wheat. We pay for a single destroyer with new homes that could have housed more than 8,000 people. This is, I repeat, the best way of life to be found on the road the world has been taking. This is not a way of life at all, in any true sense. Under the cloud of threatening war, it is humanity hanging from a cross of iron.
Humanity hanging from a cross of iron. And this is referred to as the Cross of Iron speech, if you want to, look it up. And, Dwight Eisenhower, Republican president of the United States, saying a world at war is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its people. It's destroyed its people. He also warned us about the military-industrial complex. He warned us in 1961 when he left the White House, ceased to be the president and gave his farewell address as he was handing the keys to the White House over to John Kennedy. In January of 1961, Dwight Eisenhower had this to say. Chris, you got it? No, you don't. You don't. Okay, never mind. I'm sorry. I thought he had it. So we'll come back. We'll come back to that after the break. But I do want to play Eisenhower's farewell address. So flash forward to today. Today, we have the Republican Party and the Trump administration. This is clearly not Dwight Eisenhower's Republican Party. You have the Republican Party and the Trump administration saying, we want to take money out, resources out of the hands of the poor and working families and put it into the Swiss bank accounts of the millionaires and billionaires who own and run the defense industry, the military-industrial complex. We want to transfer trillions, literally trillions of dollars from working people in the healthcare program by repealing Obamacare and replacing it with Good Luck Charlie. We want to take $600 billion from working people who are getting Obamacare subsidies and give it to the top 1/100th of 1%, to the billionaire class. And with the increases in the defense budget, we want to take literally food out of the mouths of children. We're going to dial back the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIPS. We're going to dial back food stamps. We're going to dial back all these programs that keep people in the kind of structural poverty that, frankly, our system has created. We're gonna take the bread out of children's mouths and use it to build the destroyers. The exact opposite of what Eisenhower said. Now, am I having said? I mean, seriously, $4.3 trillion in spending cuts over the next 10 years is what the Trump administration is proposing. $4.3 trillion in cuts. And it's all coming out of the hide of working people and poor people. It's, I could go through it all. $616 billion by cutting Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program. $593 billion. If they say they're going to clean up the Pentagon, right? Welfare programs, $272 billion, $190 billion out of the supplemental nutrition SNAP program, temporary assistance for needy families. It's $15 billion they're going to cut. Cutting Obamacare, cutting $72 billion out of disabilities, cutting $63 billion out of retirement benefits for federal employees by cutting their cost of living adjustments. $53 billion, they're going to hand off to the banksters by quote, changing Dodd-Frank. And then what are they going to spend the money on? Yeah, they're going to spend the money on the military. Troy, get that. I want to play that one more time, that cross of iron speech, if you don't mind. So this, having shared with you the priorities of this administration right now, that's daring to call itself Republican and trying to pretend that this is somehow conservative. The word conservative has lost all its meaning in modern America. The conservatives are con artists who are front men for big corporations and billionaires. It is that simple. They dance to their tune. They work for their interests, period, full stop. There is no intellectual honesty to the conservative movement anymore. There are no William F. Buckleys out there. And when somebody gets even close to it, like David Frum did, they throw him out of the party. So once again, this is Dwight Eisenhower, his cross of iron speech. I want you to listen to this carefully. This is what a principled Republican, they're all dead now, sounded like in 1953. And this is the truth of the horrors of this freak show, the so-called conservatives in Congress, and Mick Mulvaney and Donald Trump and Tom Price and Mike Pence, what these guys want to do to this country. Republican President Dwight Eisenhower.
Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children. The cost of one modern heavy bomber is this: a modern brick school in more than 30 cities. It is 2 electric power plants, each serving a town of 60,000 population. It is 2 fine, fully equipped hospitals. It is some 50 miles of concrete pavement. We pay for a single fighter plane with 500,000 bushels of wheat. We pay for a single destroyer with new homes that could have housed more than 8,000 people. This is, I repeat, the best way of life to be found on the road the world has been taking. This is not a way of life at all, in any true sense. Under the cloud of threatening war, it is humanity hanging from a cross of iron.
This is humanity hanging from a cross of iron. And here, the Republicans, the so-called conservatives, the Fox so-called news shills, the right-wing hate radio folks, this whole military-industrial, intellectual, communications, congressional complex funded by petro-billionaires is working to reverse the legacy of Dwight Eisenhower.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And I guess it takes a liberal to point that out. You're not hearing this on right-wing hate radio, are you? And Dwight Eisenhower also warned us about what might happen if this military-industrial complex, which he said was, essential. I mean, after World War II, prior to World War II, as he points out in his speech, we had no permanent arms industry. I mean, you had Remington and Colt, they made guns, but we had no military-industrial complex prior to 1945, really. And we had the car manufacturers cranking out tanks. We had car manufacturers, airplane manufacturers making bombers. We had companies that used to make nylons for women to wear, making parachutes. We had clothing companies making uniforms. We had food companies making K rations. And he warned us about the impact of this brand new thing that had been created in the 1940s, this military-industrial complex, which in the first draft of his speech he had called the military-industrial congressional complex. So here's his speech from 1961 as he is leaving office, President Dwight Eisenhower saying goodbye and warning us about the very industry that Donald Trump and the people in his administration and these so-called conservative Republicans in Congress want to take several $1 trillion literally out of our hands and hand it over to this insanely wealthy industry to begin with, that's insanely wealthy to begin with, and hand it over to them. The most expensive zip code in the United States is no longer Beverly Hills. It's no longer, created by Hollywood. The most expensive zip code in America is just north of Washington, D.C., and it's the homes of defense contractors and intelligence contractors. The 30, 40, 50-bedroom mansions with attached servants' quarters. I've literally, miles and miles of neighborhoods of these gated communities. It's all here. Here's Dwight Eisenhower warning us about it.
Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
There you go. We were warned. You were warned. Most of you probably weren't even alive, but we were all warned. That, by the way, was 7 years after the humanity hanging on a cross of iron speech. This guy was absolutely consistent in his worldview. The man who helped win World War II.